All right, so hi everyone. We're going to get started here. Thank you so much for joining us for the final installment of our Susitna River Coalition Winter Speaker Series. And we are here today with Ray Nix. Before we start, I would like to thank the Jessica Stevens Foundation, the Talkeetna Community Council, and the Chase Community Council, as well as all of our generous individual donors that make events like this possible. So today we are here to talk about wetlands, and we have natural resource specialist Ray Nix here to give us an education on the topic. Ray has lived in Anchorage for most of his life, moving to Anchorage as a child. There he met his wife and later moved to the Mat-Su in the 80s. So Ray's life in Alaska has involved a lot of the outdoor activities that we as Alaskans love, like hunting and trapping and fishing and snow machining. And so all of these things have really instilled a love for sustainability in his personal life and in his professional life. So professionally, Ray started out working for the Department of Natural Resources and a variety of different sectors within the DNR. And in 2012, he became the natural resource specialist for the Mat-Su Borough. Though he retired in May of 2020, Ray is super knowledgeable about wetlands and all of the projects going on in the borough that are that affect wetlands. So I would like to pass it over to Ray to tell us a little bit about wetlands and the Mat-Su Borough, and we will take questions at the end, so just feel free to go ahead and put them into the chat bar. And Ray, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Margaret. It's good to be here. I appreciate the invitation. And good evening to everybody out there online, wherever you may be. I am, as Margaret said, I am Ray Nix, and I'm new to this Zoom stuff, so you have to bear with me. I'm not that great at computer technology. So I'm here tonight to share a little bit of my experience that I've gathered over the years related to natural resource management. And as she said, I'm going to talk about a range of topics based on my experience, both personal and professional. And it's important to understand where I come from and how my experience has shaped my thinking and my actions today. And so I'm going to start way a long time ago, like when I got to Alaska, and that was in 1957. And I know that was a long time ago. So to get to the here and to get to the now and to get to the future, I got to share a little bit about the past with you, and which really has helped to shape my attitudes and my thinking. So we moved to Anchorage. I started school at Mountain View Elementary in 1961. Some of you probably weren't born then, but that's when I started school. And times were different then. Back then we traveled the Old Glen Highway to get to Palmer and to get to the little ice cream place that was out between Anchorage and Palmer. And we traveled the Old Glen. And ironically, that's where I live today, is out on the Old Glen Highway between Anchorage and Palmer. We moved out of state just before the '64 quake. And so I didn't get to experience that rumble, but I've experienced several other ones. And so that's what really makes sustainability of anything really important to me, not just wetlands, but sustainability of natural resources, food resources, all that stuff that we do. We moved out of state. We got back to Anchorage in 1966, and I can remember even back then fishing at Ship Creek. And if anybody's been to Anchorage at all, I was fishing at Ship Creek when I didn't have anybody next to me. So that's how different the population was. You know, there was a very small population back then. We moved to the Boniface Northern Lights area in 1967, and we bought 2 parcels of land. And between the parcels of land was this little stream. I didn't know it was called anadromous at the time, but I learned that word later in life. But as a kid, all I knew was that we could sit on the bridge and we could watch the salmon go underneath us and go upstream to spawn. And that was pretty cool because we were on both sides of the creek. And so it was pretty cool to be able to do that. We built a wooden bridge across it so that we could sit there on the stream and watch the fish. Unfortunately, that tributary, and I believe it was part of the South Fork of Chester Creek, got put into a pipe, and they buried it underground. And as Anchorage grew and developed, that happened with many different streams and many different places. There was a lake across the street. I don't know if it was a real lake or it was just a white spot in Chester Creek, but we called it Boniface Lake. And that's where the road stopped. That's where Northern Lights stopped back then. And if you went further than, if you went past Campbell Airstrip, you ended up in Boniface Lake. Well, that got filled, and that bog got had species of salmon in it and stuff. And so I was not knowing what I was experiencing was wetland loss, is what was happening to me in my younger days. So they put this stream underground in pipes, and it came out down beyond the school, but we never saw any salmon come back. And I've got to witness that not only back then when I was a child, but later in life, what we're seeing right now with declining stocks. When I lived in Anchorage, I can remember fishing out of Rabbit Creek. I can remember fishing out of Indian Creek. Those were the places with Ship Creek, Campbell Creek. All those creeks were places that we went and harvested our food. And my dad was in the service, and we ate a lot of fish, and we ate a lot of wild game. And we grew a garden, and we grew and we had to pull weeds. And I hated pulling weeds, but I liked eating the stuff out of the garden. In 1967, my brother and I, we had a paper route, and that paper route went all the way from Tudor Road back towards DeBar, and it stopped right at 20th Avenue, and it went from Wesleyan Drive over to Campbell Airstrip Road. If anybody's familiar with Anchorage, they know the places I'm talking. If not, you can go look at Alaska Department of Fish and Game maps, and you'll see that area. And that used to be part of the greater Anchorage area borough. We lived in the borough, and we delivered papers a long way. So every morning before school, we go off and do that. So what we got to see was firsthand the changes that were taking place in and around where we lived. And so there were only a few homes on Wesleyan Drive, and here's why this is so important. We lived in the borough, and the population boomed when the borough and the city combined and created the municipality of Anchorage. And so the population in Anchorage in 1970 was 48,000 people. In 2019, almost 292,000 people in Anchorage. So that's what we experienced. That's my experiences. I call it RPG, or rapid population growth. I mean, it just boomed. I mean, it just like made a boom, and things were different. You know, things were different then. And so some of the things that were different for me growing up was Northern Lights was dirt from Boniface to Bragah. There was only Campbell Airstrip Road, and it was mostly green and wet, except where the road and the creek was. So unless you were on the ridge or in the water, there wasn't much other stuff. There was no Benson Boulevard or Minnesota Bypass. Boniface Lake, which is a local name and named after Paul Boniface, who homesteaded the area, was filled and became part of a subdivision. The Glen Highway was a 2-lane highway to Palmer. The Parks Highway, I'm coming to Wasilla now. The Parks Highway was not completed until 1971. And most importantly, the salmon counts dwindled in the municipality despite the best efforts of Alaska Department of Fish and Game. When you have population explosions like that, and we're experiencing that now, I'll talk a little bit about that later, they do certain things and they allow certain things without thinking far enough in the future and planning for that population growth and knowing it's going to come. And what happens as a general rule in the past has been they just find a way to get the houses built, to build the infrastructure, and wetlands pay the price. And we end up with clean water issues. We end up with all kinds of stormwater pollution control. We have all kinds of things that cause us problems. So I can remember, so marginal properties become fair game is what I'm saying. When they just become fair game. And so it's important for me to continue to do the things I like to do. And that's utilize what God's given us, is those wetlands and those landscapes and the game and the fish and plant life and all that stuff. You take away the wetlands and you don't have that stuff anymore. It all goes away. Just death by a thousand cuts. And so it's really important to me to develop, but to develop and conserve at the same time. I think that's important for me. So I can remember one red light in Wasilla as we drove north with our family. And sometimes we get to stop in at Teelan's on Main Street. And I remember going out to the Little Sioux and fishing before the boat ramp and before the road that was that. I remember that stuff. I mean, that's my experience. And so to see what it used to be like, to live through it and see where we're headed with the Mat-Su, we can just read the writing on the wall. We don't have to reinvent stuff. We have our experience. We know what happens. We know, and so I'm going to get to the borough. I secured a job with the Department of Natural Resources in '86. Some of us can't live like rats, so I moved to the valley. I can't put it any blunter than that. I can't live that way. I have to have open space. I have to have that lifestyle that I hold dear to me. And so we moved to the valley. We moved out on KGB Road, and life was good. I mean, we grew vegetables in the garden. We had a greenhouse, so we grow fruits, and we go over to the Little Sioux. I can remember I was working nights at DNR, and I'd get off work about 11, and I'd come home, and my son, and in summertime, my son would already have the boat ready to go and everything ready to go, and we would shoot off and go to the Little Sioux, catch fish, come back, get a nap, go back to work. And that was our lifestyle. That's how we lived. We lived gathering and harvesting and growing what we ate. It was wonderful. The park's highway streams always contributed to filling the freezer and jars of salmon. We fished the lakes, the streams, and the saltwater to feed the family. We used fish wheels on the copper and dip nets wherever possible. We hunted moose and caribou successfully. None of those things that I just said will be possible for my great-grandchildren or even my grandchildren. I've got grandchildren right now, 9 of them, and it really scares me that they're not going to be able to do the things that I was able to do as a kid and as an adult if we don't do something about taking control at the local government level of certain things that control our destiny. So I'm real passionate about that. I'm not afraid to say that. I am just really passionate that the things I love to do are going to go away if we don't take care of them. And one person can't take care of them all. It takes us all collectively to do that. We all have a part. So in 1997, we purchased a home in the Butte. The Eklutna Tail Race, I can remember that when it was just down the road from here, and there was no campground, and there was no road in there, and parking lot in there, and it was a little trail through the woods that people that knew about it went and fished. And what happens with population, there's more. And so what I've seen happen is the population growth in the borough recently. It's been booming. It's still booming. It's still one of the fastest growing regions in the United States, not just in Alaska, but nationwide. It's growing by leaps and bounds, even with the economy or whatever else gets thrown at us, the pandemic, whatever. I think we're still growing. And so really important to me. I can remember when we bought this place, it's about 4 acres, and I could go outside in the morning and I could sit on a small deck and I could have my cup of coffee. Couldn't see anybody. I could hear the birds chirping, and that was it. That's what I heard. And that was in 1997. That's not what I hear today. What I hear today are the trucks going by and the cars going by, and they recently, and I'm not afraid of change, or nor do I want to stop change and development. I like development. I like responsible development. So they did this road called the Selden Extension going through the valley, and unfortunately for the people that live out here on the Old Glen, that turned into a commuting route for the people from Anchorage, so they could bypass Wasilla and all that. And so the traffic load on the Old Glen Highway is astronomical compared to what it used to be. Holy moly, they got a lot of questions over there. So I'm living out here. We cleared some trees, tilled the soil, grew a lot of potatoes, had family gatherings at harvest time. used to be able to drive our wheelers from here to Jim Creek because there was no law against that back then. And that was really huge because that was one of our recreation areas. We didn't go burn cars. We didn't go do all the stuff that they've done. And I really appreciate what the borough has done to clean that area up. They've really spent a lot of time and effort to make it more family friendly because it was not family friendly. And with the Fish Creek, Jim Creek management plan, that happened when I first started at the borough. I gave information, but I wasn't really part of the crafters of the plan. But it's a nice place to go. I mean, there's a lot of families that go out there and recreate, and they're not just destroying things. So it's really important to me. So then came the creep. And the creep is the population. It started growing. So where I was at back in '97, I couldn't see anybody. I couldn't hear anybody. Now I got trucks that are clanging over here in the summertime. They're belly dumps at 5 o'clock in the morning. And the reverses. I hate the reverse beep, beep, beep. I hate that sound. And that's what I have here on my 4 acres. So it's not as bad. I haven't cut the trees, so I have some buffers. I try to protect myself while at the same time making sure no trees can hit my house if they catch fire or anything too. So it's a balancing act to play. So people started moving in around us. It's still fairly quiet on our little parcel. I'm looking at my notes because I can't remember all this stuff in my head. We built a family cabin, as we talked about a little bit earlier, about 20 miles off the grid 10 years ago. Last fall, we counted 22 swans on at one time on that lake. That is important to me. That is my retirement home. That is where I want to go to. I want to go to a place that is peaceful and quiet. And except for they make a little bit of noise when something comes around, but that's okay. And so that's my piece of serenity, is to have that. You take away that lake or those wetlands, and that lake rises and falls. It rises and falls. Based on precipitation, a lot of it is. And but the wetlands that are around it, they're so very important. We hunt there, we gather there, we do all those things there. And that's the way my life is. That's how I live life. And so that's where we plan to spend our retirement. I was the Matanuska Borough Natural Resource Manager. I'm now in the borough. Matanuska manager between May 8th, 2012 and 2020. I retired May 1st of last year. So I'm retired. And I can remember my first day coming to the borough. So I get to the borough, and the first thing they do is they hand me this book. And this book is about 900 pages. And they say, here, this is for you. And I said, oh, great. Okay. Well, I found out what it was. And what it was is a natural resource management unit asset management plan. And so about 2 years before I got to the borough, they had spent 5 years creating this big book. And in the meantime, they had a moratorium on all timber sales. And I won't get into the politics of why. All I know is the assembly at the time felt it necessary to stop timber activity and develop a plan. And it was a plan. It was quite the plan. And so I got to read that book when I first got there. And so what it did was that plan created 22 natural resource management units. And why that is important is because that was borough-owned land that we had control over our destiny at a higher level than we do over land that is not borough-owned. And so what we could do is we could go in and do land use designations and identify those wetlands. And so I got the opportunity so I was a timber guy too. I wasn't just a wetlands guy, I was a timber guy too. So I created the personal use firewood program at the borough that's currently being operated, and did some salvage sales and some timber sales by that book, by that big 900-page book. And it wasn't easy. It didn't make it not doable, but it didn't make it easy. And so we went in 2000, finished it in 2019, and created an update to that natural resource management plan. And the update did several things. One of the first things I said is, in the original plan, it said anything over 40, any wetland over 40 acres should be buffered. I said, no. I said, no. I said, any wetland should be buffered, period. That not just wait till it gets this big. You know, even the small ones, you buffer them. You don't do any activity that's going to damage the wetland. There's no reason to. If you want to have timber cells, you do them in the winter when there's sufficient snow depth, ground cover, so that you can do them during the winter time. But it was really important to me to get those changes before I left. And so it was really awesome that that was one of the things that we got. We got to update that. We got to change the thought process of, of, of agriculture land and how agriculture land can coexist with wetlands. It can be done, and it just has to be done the right way. And so I worked a lot on that natural resource management unit plan, and we got that adopted by the assembly, and I believe it was in October of 2019. So here we have this, and this is the reason I share this, is because this is the first layer of defense. So we have a natural resource management units plan for the borough, for our property. Why would we expect anybody else should be not held to some standard as well? Because it's going to affect our wetlands and our fish and our wildlife. And so that's what happened when they created in 2012. And I'm going to go blow right by the natural resource management unit plan, other than to tell you there's a lot of acreages was involved, and the significant changes were made to the updated version related to protection of wetlands. And so looking back, now that I've talked about that and about the timber a little bit, the agriculture a little bit, all which I have my hands in and I have my my head in, and I'm very passionate about agriculture, like I am about hunting, fishing, everything else. I'm passionate about agriculture, because where we live, sustainability is about the most important thing we can have. If we destroy what we have, and something happens like an earthquake that we had here a couple of years ago, it's ironic, because I was at a forum for food security on a Thursday, and the next day we had that earthquake and we couldn't get water in the Matsu. And you can't fix it once it's done. You can, but restoration is a lot harder to do than preservation. So food security is really, really important. Sustainability is really important. And so looking back, setting all that aside, I was sitting at my desk on the second day, and a coworker came by with a cart stacked as high as I am tall. It was way up here. And I was sitting in my little chair looking at her, and she said, "This is yours." And I said, "Well, what is this?" And she smiled, and she said, briefly explained to me what it was. And what it was all things wetlands, all things mitigation, and banking. She talked about HUCs, HUCS. She talked about umbrella agreements and mitigation sites and conservation easements, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and MSB wetland bank lands, and ordinances and agreements and watersheds and credits and functional assessments. So when somebody asks me today a question, I understand, because there's a lot to know about all those things. And I'm no expert. I just have some experience with it. That's the only difference. And so the Clean Water Act and the 404 permitting process and the final rule. So I want to tell you a little bit about the wetlands before I go into mitigation banking. I'm here to tell you that something you already know: wetlands have value. Wetlands have a lot of value. They have so much value that you can start writing and you have to go to multiple pages because they have that much value. So I don't know how I can say it any different than that. They have more value than I would have ever imagined. Open space, clean water, recreation opportunities, hunting, fishing, tourism, skiing, snow machining, scenery, pristine environment, pristine land and water resources, Viking, stormwater management, flood control, erosion control, moose habitat, salmon and waterfowl habitat, groundwater recharge, purification, and cultural history. The wetlands are huge. They're probably one of the most valuable resources we ever got from the state of Alaska. And if they had known it, we might not have got it. they're valuable, and they're not only valuable for those things that I just listed. They're also valuable economically in a way that people don't understand. So, and I'll talk more about that in the mitigation banking side. But for when you start doing mitigation banking, the only reason that they're valuable monetarily is, other than the side things, for cash money, is when you have a mitigation bank and you sell credits. And so some of the key Mat-Su wetland issues, we need local control. Who better to tell us, or tell a developer what they need to do if they want to do something in our borough? It's what does anybody else know about that other than us? We're the one that takes the canoe out on the lake and knows that there's invasive species or whatever. We're the one that knows that and says, hey, we need to fix that, because that lake won't last with that. And so so all those things that are so good and valuable, effective management of those resources are critical. And I don't want to leave it to somebody else. I don't want to leave it to somebody back in Washington, D.C. or somewhere else to determine that. I got to travel when I was working with the borough. I got to travel to, I'll come back to that. So how do we effectively manage the wetlands? How do we do that? Well, we do it by following the 2012 Mat-Su Borough Wetlands Management Plan. It's a wonderful plan. It's on the website. There's so much information available on the website. I got to give a shout out to Ted Eichscheid. He has done a great job with getting information and making it available on the website. There's so many resources available to individuals and groups that they can get that information and get the detailed information if they want to be proactive. So the key Mat-Su wetland issues: we need local control, the lack of consolidated wetland information, major development projects, difficulty in creating and restoring wetlands, rapid population growth, RPG, water pollution and impaired water quality, fisheries population decline, invasive plant species threat, and water quality limits. So I'm going to talk a little bit about mitigation banking. So I knew nothing about mitigation banking when I got to the borough, and I read a lot. And I went to several education conferences, not fun conferences, real good learning conferences. And after I went to the first one, I realized how good it really was. And so I got to travel to, I'm trying to think of which one I went to first. I think it was New Orleans. I went to New Orleans. And one would think, well, what does New Orleans got to do with us? Well, they got wetlands. And they've got wetland banks, and they've got in lieu fees. And they've been doing it a lot longer than we have. And so they've been doing wetland mitigation down in the lower 48 for a long time. And what I found out is not only do they do wetland mitigation, but they do it at the local level. They don't just do it at the core level. They do it at the local level or at the state level. It's done all across the United States like that. This is not what we're trying to do with this new ordinance deal is not something new. It's something that was talked about in the plan, the 2012 plan. And I got to commend the borough assembly for asking the questions, saying, well, what about these local wetland mitigation banks? Or what do you know about them? Can we get some examples? And I said, yeah. So I got them some examples. And they said, well, we want to have a workshop. And so I said, yeah, okay, we can get a workshop. So we had a workshop with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the EPA, Alaska Department of Fish and Game. Who are the other ones? Oh, my goodness gracious. Fish and Wildlife Commission, one more, and a retired Corps worker. So I brought all these people together, took them to the assembly and said, okay, go talk about supplemental ordinances. And they did. And so this isn't new. I've been working on this for about 3 years or so, and while I was employed at the borough. But I got to travel around and I got to see different things. And one of the things that I saw that was really important to me was I got to see bus loads of children going to these mitigation sites and seeing what was happening and seeing it, the water being filtered and seeing all that intake and discharge and all those things. And there was places where they could walk along the boardwalk. It was a great educational opportunity, and that's what we need. We need the educational opportunity so that people can realize how valuable these wetlands really are. I'm probably getting my voice probably elevated. The discharge from Dallas. I went to a site in Dallas where they take the gray water and they take it and they send it down the road, way out, goes through various filters and everything else and systems, mitigation sites all along the way, and then it comes back, it gets pumped back, and it's clean water, and it's been filtered. And so each one of these sites that I got to go to showed me something different. I watched them take a farm, an ag parcel, and continue to grow the crops, but also at the same time, because of their water laws where it was at, they were able to turn around and actually make a new wetland and created a wetland. They didn't take a creek. They took water runoff and they went through a system of channels and everything else, and they created a wetland, and they got credits for that. And so there's different ways to manage your wetlands, but it's a good place to start with the Matanuska Borough's wetland management plan to look and see. So when it comes to banks, what I want to say is that so the borough, and I believe in its infinite wisdom, back in 2002-ish, about that time, they were short of revenue, and they were looking for a way to generate revenue, and not just sell land to generate revenue. They didn't want to give nothing up. They wanted to keep what they had, but still generate revenue. And so someone came up with the idea, well, why don't we look and, put an RFP out and see if anybody's got any ideas? We got a lot of wetlands. What can we do with them? And so they did. They put it on RFP, request for proposals, and came back, and that one of the solicitors, they went ahead and the assembly said, okay, let's go down that road and look. And so they came back with three options. You can either do it yourself, you can partially do it yourself, or you can hire somebody to take it all over. And they chose the route that they chose, which was to create a public-private partnership with Sustainable Environments LLC, and that is Susitna Mitigation Bank. And so they made an agreement, a partnership agreement, and I'll try to say it as accurately as I can. So what happens with the mitigation bank is they get these things called service areas, and the service area for Susitna mitigation was one of the HUCs, hydrologic unit code, is what that HUC stands for. And so the 6-digit HUC was 190205, which is the Susitna watershed. The smaller HUC in size is the 8-digit HUC, 190200505. And so why is that important? Well, that's important because when you have mitigation or compensatory mitigation that's required within a certain watershed, if you have credits released within that watershed, you move to the top of the list. If you don't have credit, because you can mitigate that right now. You sign a piece of paper, and those credits go from wherever they are to the Corps or whoever's requiring them. And so that is the primary purpose of a mitigation bank, is to prepare for compensatory mitigation needs. And so and there's a big spiel on the Susitna, but it's really about any bank. Any bank is what they do. So there's three types, and there's a little brochure that's on the borough website. It's about the Corps, and it talks about avoid, minimize, and compensate. And those are the three order of things that you have to do when you want to develop in wetlands. You have to go to the Corps, you got to get a permit, and depending on how much you're impacting depends on how detailed of a permit you got to do and how much avoidance you got to do in minimization. If you wanted to go to the Corps and fill in Matanuska River, I don't think they're going to say yes. I just don't think that's going to be the answer you're going to hear. but they do have discretion. They have discretion, and I'll take it back to about 2014, I believe, and it's an example of that. They had the discretion. There was about 11 acres that were needed for a Wasilla Creek project around Wasilla Creek, filling of wetlands, and Wasilla Creek is in the top 25 threatened streams of the United States. And the borough offered to do compensatory mitigation and buy credits, and the Corps said, no, you don't have to. And I said, what? And so they used their discretion, and part of that discretion was that they said was that until at least 5% of the watershed has been degraded, you're good, not a problem. And I said, well, if that was my land, I wouldn't want 5% of my land degraded before you start getting compensation. And so I took that, and I took it to a hearing that was in Wasilla with Governor Murkowski, or Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan, and I wrote a memo for the manager at the time, and I took that and I said, you're wanting to make the regulations less than, and you're already filling wetlands in one of the most endangered streams, top 25 in the United States. And so that didn't set real good with me. I couldn't understand that, especially after the borough was offering to pay. I mean, doing the right thing, and of course saying no. And so after 2014, what we found out was that there was some policies that the Corps was making, but they weren't making public. And I'm not here to bash the Corps. That is not my job. Somebody else can do that. I'm here to say that we need to take charge of our own destiny. That's what we need to do with the borough. That's what we need to do when it comes to wetland. We need to take charge of it, or it's going to go away. And so somebody's going to say, what happened to our wetlands? What happened to how come the waterfowl aren't coming back? How come the salmon aren't coming back? How come this? Why is that? What's the water temperature? Is it changing? What's the impact and the effect? Are we doing something to make it change by these big projects or small projects or whatever? Those are, and I hope none of those questions are over here on the side that I'm just asking right now, because I don't have the answers. I don't have the answers unless we take charge of our own destiny. And so with mitigation banks, they serve a purpose. The purpose that they serve is they have at hand ready credits released. So when a developer goes to develop, he can go to one of these banks and he can buy those credits, meet his obligations to the Corps, and he can go do his project. That's what they're for. And the Susitna Bank is a partner of the borough, and all that is in public information. I'm not telling you any secrets about that relationship or what it looks like. And when they sell credits, every credit they sell, they take that money and they pay expenses. One of those first expenses is they pay for the acreage fair market value of that property that they used. Say they sell one credit, they take whatever the fair market value appraisal of that acre is, they give that to the borough in the form of a check before anything else. They also take, I forgot the number now, it's they take an amount and they put it in a long-term stewardship account. So it's not just you sell the credit, you split it. You sell the credit, there's an instrument that tells you who gets what, where, why, when, and how. There's no shady dealing. It's straight up, and it's based on competition. And so whoever that's what I would do if I was looking for a bid for a house or anything. I'm going to solicit bids and look at who gives me the best deal. And so that's why the Susitna Bank partnered with the Matanuska Borough. The Matanuska Borough had a lot of land. They had a lot of wetland. And so there was investors that said, okay, well, we can turn that into a mitigation bank. And these are the terms, and these are the terms, and the borough at that time said, great, and I still think it's a great deal. What happened was the Corps quit requiring compensatory mitigation in about 2014. they had discretion, and so they quit. So what happens is if you don't sell credits and you're a mitigation bank, Susitna was kind of lucky in that the borough provided the land, so they didn't have to go out and buy land. They just had to do the science on it. They had to go through the core process to create the mitigation bank and get the credits released. And so, by the way, anybody that's thinking just because you got some wetlands and you can run out there and you can make a mitigation bank, just remember, this one was started, the process started in 2003. It didn't get one single credit release until 2009. And that's a long process, 6-year process to get those credits released. And what happened was there was this thing in 2008 called the 2008 rule, the Corps' 2008 rule. And so Susitna and the borough had went through all the steps up to getting released, and then came the new 2008 rule, and then they had to go through a complete IRT process all over again. And so they had to go through an IRT process twice because of the new rule. So the new rule, which is now the old rule, the 2008 rule has been changed by policymakers, and the Corps can pretty much do what they want, which doesn't make them bad. What it means is that the borough can focus more of its time on these bigger projects where the large impacts take place real quick, and you have a real decline in your functionality, because that's what has to happen to every one of these wetlands that goes into the bank. They have to do a functional assessment, and when they made the agreement to do that, they made an agreement. The borough made an agreement to provide land and put them in the wetlands bank classification, so that Susitna could bring those properties online. And how you do that is first you go do the science, and that's not cheap. And then after you do that, then you have to go through the core process, and then you have to go and get the credits released. You got to get the credits released. But to do that, you have to lay a conservation easement across the top. So the 2008 rule changed just being able to use a deed restriction to having to actually place a conservation easement with a long-term stewardship account attached to it. So there were some requirements. How am I doing on time?
So I'm unmuting myself. You have a little bit more time here, Ray, but this is such great information.
Okay. So thanks. So it's really, really important to note that it's not like a wetland is immediately a cash value, except in the other things that it does. And I read that list, and I believe that list, and all those things have a monetary value. Just ask your fishing guides, ask your storefronts, ask the people that are in the areas that are doing bed and breakfast and tours and hiking and biking and all those things. Those wetlands are valuable. And so the mitigation banks, what they do is they make it still practicable for development. And so there could be 4. I'm not sure about the last one. I can't get a definite answer. But there's the Pioneer Reserve. There's and that's a mitigation bank. And there's the in lieu fee, which is the Great Land Trust. And there was one that I saw a prospectus, but I don't know if it actually got done. And that was the Diamond Willow Mitigation Bank right out around Spring Creek over there, which was a state-private partnership, much like the borough public-private partnership. So it's not new. It's not scary. It's not mean. It's just a way that 2 different people can come together, bringing 2 different things to the party, and it makes them work for both of them. And so what the borough gets, it gets a percentage of the profits, and the bank gets a percentage of the profits. And the bank just sold some credits, and it's now public because it was in a report. But it was over $200,000 that went to the borough. Now, what the borough does with that, that's not up to me. That's up to the borough. And so whether it, in the past, it went to the land disposal income in land management, a portion of it went to somewhere else for the assembly. But the bottom line is where it goes is not important to me. What's really important to me is we protect our wetlands. We do it to the best of our ability, and we don't get rolled over by big development projects. that come through, and because 5% hasn't been degraded yet, they get a pass. I'm not about passes. So are we ready to answer questions? Did I give you enough information? Did I miss? Oh, I want to talk about this ordinance.
Great.
Can I do that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, that was, there's probably going to be big gaps, but so this is the new supplemental wetland mitigation ordinance. That's the latest draft that I could find. I'm hoping I'm working off the latest draft. It's a pretty good document. It's had some of the changes, you know, I've made comments along the way. I actually started when when planning got directed to give them a document to look at. I was attending the meetings and providing input, but I saw that they had it very well, and so I kind of backed out of it a little bit, and then of course I retired. But a couple of the things was I wanted to make sure, because I'm really in favor of the supplemental ordinance. Not exactly as it's written, but I'm really in favor of that concept. It's really important. Otherwise, all across the nation, they wouldn't be doing it everywhere. There's a reason they do it. They do it because they want control and destiny of their land and their wetlands. And so this one, they did a really good job. There was a couple things that they've changed, because I wanted to make sure that only large scale development projects were affected by this. I didn't want to hurt the small guy, because the Corps will take care of that. If somebody wants to fill the Mat River, they're going to say no. So we got to trust that the Corps is taking care of the little things, and I think they are. There was an 11-acre parcel not too long ago that they required compensatory mitigation on, and so I'm confident when it comes to that, because there's not a lot of politics in that. And in these larger projects, there may be. I'm not saying there is, but there may be. And so I trust that they're going to do little stuff, but I want to make sure that we don't let the big stuff go by without making sure that we can at least protect our wetlands. We may not always be, it may not be Suitna who gets the bid for the credits. That's not about that. It's about protecting the wetlands. That's what's important. So I don't care who gets the bid. That's between the people. I don't care, but I think it should apply to everybody that's doing a large scale project, and not take a whole section and create a whole new 1731.060 to let somebody off the hook from doing something because they have a federal permit already. Well, this ain't a federal permit what we're talking about. This is a borough permit that says before you fill, you need to come get this permit. It doesn't say as long as you, well, it does kind of. It says if you have a federal permit, you're good. You don't have to, and they don't do full compensatory mitigation. It don't matter. It lets them off the hook. And I don't want to let anybody off the hook. I want sustainability in wetlands at all levels. I'm confident the Corps will take care of the small stuff, but I'm not confident about the big stuff. So there's a part of this that stands out to me. Like I said, 1731.060. A needs to go away, and 1 underneath it needs to be changed. And I'm hoping that there will be some action at some level that'll happen. And of course, I have no guarantees of that. But it's really important that we, if not now, when? And if not the assembly, who? So the ball's in the public's in their court. Just wipe all those away. I hope it's been helpful. Has it been helpful? I hope the information is helpful.
There's a lot of great information that you shared, a lot of information, which is good. And we do have a lot of questions for you.
Okay, well, I will try.
I can read. Sorry, I can go ahead and
What?
read them aloud to you if you like, or I can message them to you and read them aloud. So what works best for you?
Why don't you just read the question to me and I'll try to answer it.
Great.
Can I decline questions?
Yes.
No.
I'm sorry.
So I'm still here. My internet just been Ray, this has been great. Thank you.
So one of the first questions we have for you is beaver dams and ponds are important wetlands. How can one stop the destruction of these by something like the railroads?
One more time, I'm sorry. I was trying to read and listen at the same time.
Beaver dams
I'm listening.
and ponds are important wetlands. How can one stop the destruction of these by the railroad?
I didn't know you. So how did they want to stop the destruction of beaver ponds or beaver dams?
That's what it sounds like. Beaver dams and ponds.
Depends whose property it's on.
Okay.
Depends whose property it's on. If it's, I think ownership has a lot to do with that because there's a different level of rules probably for each. And then there's some probably that go over, like I know as a trapper, you can't destroy a den.
Right.
But you can notch the dam. But you better not be doing it on somebody's property who don't want you to notch the dam. So property ownership is really important
Okay.
on what you can do and how you can do it.
Got it.
Make sense?
Yes, I think so. And if whoever's question that was, I believe that was a Paul, pass along any more if you have them. Oh, he said he had them destroy a dam on my property without permission. So
Who did?
a fellow in the chat. The railroad
Oh,
heard it.
Tell him to call me.
Okay.
I'd love to talk with him, but I'd have to look at it a little bit and see why they did what they did.
Sounds good. Okay. We will connect you guys. So the next,
Yeah, that'd be fine.
okay, great. So the next question is, I thought the Army Corps of Engineers required full compensatory mitigation of wetlands in the lower 48, and that only Alaska had this weird exemption of 5% of the watershed. If so, why do cities and states also have local ordinances? Wouldn't there be complete mitigation through the Corps?
Well, but I can tell you when we brought the Corps to visit the assembly and give a talk, they were fine, even at the national level, to have the rule, if you will, be done by the local governing body. I mean, why would they not want it to be done by the local people? They'd have a lot less headaches if somebody else is making the rules or following the rules. It is. I know Alaska is, quote, different, or at least some would say it is because we have a lot of wetlands, but I don't live out there or over there. I live right here in the borough. And so I would hope that if somebody lives somewhere else, they would be as passionate about their wetlands as I am about mine. And so he's the person that asked the question is probably mostly correct, but I would imagine that there's reasons why the local people do it, and it's probably because they want to have control over what happens.
Okay.
The Corps is not the quickest response team, I can tell you that. So
Okay.
that's what I know about that.
Great. Thank you. Another comment and question says that when I think about the West Susitna Access Road, I think about the Transcontinental Railroad of the 1860s. I see the same trends and the devastation of wildlife and wilderness, the same development issues that destroys water quality, and the same enthusiasms where people hunger for authentic connections to a wild place for the sake of economic development that can destroy it. I probably watch Ryan Peterson's Super Salmon once a month to encourage me in hopes that we can challenge politicians and the developers to think and plan, and teach the people who don't know how while we entertain. My question is, how can we distill the information that you, Ray, are giving us that is so spot on and put into images and stories that capture the imagination and show them what's at stake? Ryan Peterson's documentary did that, and I'm horrified that the place where you live, a place that changed my life, could become as abused and misunderstood as what we have lost long ago here in Indiana and much of the lower 48. So a bit of a comment and a little bit of a question about what are those images that we can share, and how do you think that we get a message out, excuse me?
Well, it's going to take someone that has the capacity to go out and document those things and put it in a format that you can present to politicians, and you can show them this is it. Much like when I started tonight, I started back in 1957 for a reason, because I got to see those things that the gentleman from Indiana probably seen happen in his place happened in Anchorage too. And so one of the things that's really important, really important, is that preservation is much cheaper to do than restoration. So in other words, I would travel all around. Some of the credits that we're selling in New Orleans or in Kentucky or in Dallas, they were $1 million+ for a credit because they're doing restoration. The difference is we don't have to do restoration. Why are you killing 5% of our watershed when you shouldn't kill any of it? You should, right off the bat, preserve an equal amount. And one of the things that's really important to know is that, so the Corps prefers restoration credits. They don't prefer preservation credits. And so when someone uses preservation credits, sometimes the Corps will require a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 ratio. So in other words, if you're impacting 1 acre, you may have to do as high as 3 credits for that 1 acre. So, and in the lower 48, I hear it's worse. I hear that sometimes it's as high as 10 preservation credits versus doing restoration, because their focus is they want to restore what's already been damaged. I'm saying don't destroy it in the first place. And that's the message that needs to get out, is don't destroy it to start with.
Along those lines of don't destroy it to start with, how is there a way that we could calculate the cost of rehabilitation when we look at these proposals that don't consider mitigation? Does that make sense? To show them how much it will cost them in the future, or how much it will cost us.
Well, you probably could. I'm sure there's a way that you could figure it out. Like I said, when you start looking at spots where they're actually doing restoration, it is not cheap. It's not cheap at all. It's big bucks, and so I guess I guess I'm not coming up with an answer for your question.
Okay, that's fine. I think a lot of these questions don't necessarily have answers, but are good.
I think you could guess, you could speculate, you could run some numbers, but you're really going to know when the next guy comes in and the 5 acres is destroyed, how much does he have to pay?
Right.
Because then there's more than 5. So does now the next gas project, something, West Susitna, do they have to pay because now 5%'s been met? That's not the way I think. I think that it's much better to preserve up front what you can preserve up front. If the requirement is higher for preservation credits, I don't care. Whatever it is that we can preserve our wetlands for our kids, our grandkids, and our great grandkids. If it's not us, who's going to do it? I just don't know who. So be proactive. Be proactive. That's what I would say. Preserve. Don't wait till you gotta restore it. I know when I first got to the borough, I'll just tell a quick story. When I first got there, I had never done anything like this. I helped on a bank restoration project on Big Lake. So I went out and did what they showed me to do, and how we were shooting willows into the sides of the banks and trying to provide some restoration. Didn't cost much money because my time was free. And so it's not free when you have to pay someone to come and restore.
Yep.
Preserving is always the best method as far as I'm concerned.
So another question we have is, at assembly meeting where they considered stopping this process, neither assembly members nor the borough staff, the development director and the acting planning director, seem to understand mitigation banks. How can we educate them and advocate for this ordinance?
So they're two different animals. Okay, entirely two different animals. I did speak that night. I spoke when that resolution came up. I spoke, and I kind of said some of the same words that I'm saying here tonight. Is if not now, when? And if not you, who? And so there's not really. I want to be careful. There's a distinct difference in what I'm doing in supporting this wetland ordinance with some modifications than the banking side of it. So they, I guess what I'm saying is they know stuff about it. I don't remember. All I remember is what I said that night. I don't remember what they said. There were some questions, but they know wetlands. That's what's important for this ordinance. They know wetlands, and they know what needs to be protected, and that's important. That's important. That's why I really appreciate the work that came out of the planning department to get information out, and that's the best that we can do. We can put the information out there. The borough website is a perfect place to do that. You can go to the core website. I mean, you can go to many different locations to get this information, but I like the way that it's been categorized and put out on the borough website. It makes it really easy for me to use and go get that information. And so that's what I got to say about that. I think planning is doing a good job, but you gotta separate the two. It's hard to talk like I did tonight about mitigation banking and the ordinance at the same time, because it gets like this, and we don't want it to get like that. We want the ordinance it's a standalone document. It's a standalone document. We want to protect our resources. They're your resources, my resources. We want to protect them. Here's how we can do that. And it doesn't have nothing to do with the core permit. It has nothing to do with anybody else. It's a standalone document. It stands all by itself. And that's the way it needs to be passed, where it stands by itself, not contingent on some state permit or federal permit or anything else. It needs to stand all by itself. And I think it, other than one little part that I talked about, other than that, I think it is exactly what I would stand in front of it, not have to stand behind it. I would stand in front of it.
Great, thank you. The next question is there a timeline that the wetlands and the mitigation bank need to be used by, or are they set aside forever with or without developmental pressures? If they aren't used, could they ever go back into developable land?
Well, I don't know what they're going to do in the future, but when we do a conservation easement and we sell a credit, we do that in perpetuity. So what comes down from some court somewhere down the road, way down the road, I don't know. But so what we do, the banks do, is they lay a conservation easement across those credits, and it's protecting them in perpetuity. and you have to follow the rules of the conservation easement. And if you violate those rules, you can be held accountable. So the example that comes to mind right off the bat is there's a parcel out Susitna Parkway. It's called the Fish Creek Wetlands, and it's been, the science was done. They're selling credits. The conservation easement is there. I do not ever foresee anybody being able to undo that. The borough ultimately, here's the key thing, and I didn't say this earlier, I should have. When the bank, the Susitna Wetland Mitigation Bank, when they give the borough the money for the appraised value of the acreage, the 1 acre, when they pay them that, they're not buying the land. They're just paying for the use of that land in perpetuity for this use, for this purpose. Does that make sense? So the borough is still the owner of the land now, and so they own the land. They're getting revenue from the land, and they're protecting their wetlands. That's a triple win.
Got it. Let's see, what other questions? Does anybody have any more questions at this point for Ray? It seems as though we don't have any more questions at this point, Ray. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add, kind of to wrap up?
I hope that I made it easier for some to understand the distinct difference between mitigation banking, compensatory mitigation, wetland ordinance. I mean, they're all, every one of those topics could have been one topic in the last 2 hours. I mean, it's the level of detail that I tried to bring forth, and sometimes it's hard because there's a lot of detail. So with any of these things, what I would say is if you don't know where to get the information, let me know. I can point you in a direction to get what information you need if I don't know it, and I'd be more than willing to do that. I'm ecstatic. When I left the borough, when I retired, there was about 3 things that were important that we didn't get accomplished, and that was one of them. And that was really an important one for me, was the Supplemental Wetland Mitigation Ordinance. And so that's why I'm sitting here talking with you and whoever's listening tonight, is because I want to get the message out. I want to get the message out that this is important. It's really, really important. And as far as, I'm going to touch base just on one other topic that was mentioned, and it's West Susitna access. So to me, West Susitna access is a little different for me. I can remember when I worked in the Division of Agriculture, and Senator Stevens got us $25 million to put a bridge across the Little Sioux over to the ag land. And the farmers were fighting over who was going to get it. And was we going to get it, or they going to get it? And we didn't get it. And so my deal was, when I was at the borough, I just wanted, let's just get to the other side of the Little Sioux. Let's just do that first. Let's get that. That doesn't mean I'm against the bigger picture. It just means that let's get across there, because I know that there's ag land over in there that can be compatible with wetland protection at the same time. And so develop the land, conserve the land, and plan for those population booms. And what's going to happen when it booms is the infrastructure is going to take place. So anyway, I'm just really glad I got an opportunity to say what I had to say. And if anybody has any questions about what I had to say, I'd be more than happy to have a discussion with them. I'm all about development. I'm all about sustainability. So we can do both. Let's do both.
Thank you so much. And if anybody ends up having more questions, they can email me and I can pass those questions along to Ray. I'll put my email here in the chat. Oh, wait. And again, and one last call for questions before we lots of information here. So let's questions asked, answer while we can.
Okay,
Great. Well, thank you, Ray, so
thanks for
much.
having me.
Thank you for spending your evening with us here. It was super educational. And this will be up on our YouTube channel, on the SRC YouTube channel, and on the Facebook event page if you'd like to share it with anyone. So, yeah, thank you so
Oh,
much.
definitely.
Yeah,
Thank you, Ray. That was great. Thanks, Margaret, for putting this together.
great.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great night, everybody, and see you next
All
week
right. Next winter?
for the our last winter speaker series event today. So thank you for being the final speaker.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Margaret.
Bye.